Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. We're just waiting, giving a few minutes for everyone to join the webinar, and then we'll kick off. So we'll give it a couple more minutes and we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. We are going to just give it one more minute for a chance for people to join the webinar, and then we will get underway. I think we can get started now. So I just want to, again, thank everyone for joining us today for the Kind²Mind Marketing webinar. So I'm Sahil, I'm the Key Partnerships Manager at The Big Give, and we have Beth, who is our Marketing Manager at The Big Give, and we have Lindsay, who formerly worked at the FSI, who is kindly sort of delivering the webinar today. So she has taken part in Big Give campaigns before, so has a lot of fundraising expertise and knowledge that she'll be able to share with you. So if we just go on to the next slide. Yeah, so just want to do some house rules before we get started. So there is a chat box at the bottom right corner, or on the right-hand side of your panel. Please introduce yourselves to other people in the webinar. Just say who you are, what charity you're coming from, just so everyone can start to get to know each other, do a bit of networking. Please make sure that your chat reply is set to everyone. So where it says to, just make sure that's set to everyone so everyone can see what you're sort of writing. We have the Q&A box at in the bottom of your Zoom panel. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, put your questions in there, and myself and Beth will either answer them in real time or we'll hold them off for the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. There is a captions button in the Zoom panel at the bottom, so you may need to click on more. So if you need to use that, click on more, click on captions, and then you can enable the captions to see the transcription. And a reminder, we are recording this webinar, so we will be posting it on our YouTube channel, so you can rewatch it or share it with any of your colleagues later on. If you have any questions after the webinar, please contact us directly at hello@biggive.org, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. If we go on to the next slide. There we go. Yep. So this webinar is roughly about 1.5 hours long, including a 15-minute Q&A session at the end. So it's key steps for putting your campaign together, knowing who your audience are, crafting your message, getting the word out, and making an achievable plan. We'll also feature some case studies from previous Big Give campaigns just to augment the learning. And as we mentioned, there's time for Q&A, and please feel free to network throughout the webinar in the chat box, as mentioned. If we go to the next slide. So we'll just have some reminders about how the campaign works. So the campaign launches at 12 p.m. midday on 15th May, and it ends at 12 p.m. midday, 22nd of May. All donations need to be made via your Kind²Mind campaign page on the Big Give website to be matched. Donations need to be made via credit, debit card, Google, and Apple Pay. And if donations are £500 or more, donors can use the BACS donation facility. We will send you an email about how donors can use the BACS donation facility if they want to use that option. Donations will be matched up to your match funding pot amount. If you hit your target before the campaign ends, you can still receive unmatched donations. For social media, please do feel free to tag us in any posts that you're putting on your social media channels, and we can try and share them on our channels too. All resources and assets can be found in the support section of your Big Give charity portal under Kind²Mind. And as we mentioned before, any questions, contact us at the email there, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. With all that said and done, I will now hand over to Lindsay to deliver the webinar.
Thanks so much. Thank you both. Nice to see everyone, or at least see your names. I can't see your faces, unfortunately. But hello, nice to meet you all. Thanks everyone who's saying hi in the chat box. Nice to know who we've got here. People all over the UK. It looks like people from all sorts of different causes, all focusing on the same core function around mental health. I can see some questions coming through in the chat box already. Just a reminder, if you've got a question that you want to make sure we definitely see, make sure you pop it in the Q&A box, just so that means it won't get lost when I ask you to put more things in the chat box later. But yes, you will get the slides afterwards and a recording as well. So hello, keep saying hi in the chat box. So as Sahil said, my name's Lindsay. It's really nice to meet you all. We have got up till 1:30 together today, and I'm going to do my very, very best to make sure we have 15 minutes at least at the end to have some Q&A and some discussion and for all your questions about the campaign. But what we're going to be covering today, really, this is some space. I'm going to share with you lots of information, but also this is a space to do a bit of the planning and thinking yourself. So I've got a couple of exercises, a couple of moments of reflection for you to think about how you're actually going to tackle this. And I know it's a bit of a quick turnaround this time. You've not got months and months to plan in advance, but we're going to do our best to come up with a plan that seems achievable and effective for your organisation, for your campaign. So I'll kick us off by thinking about objectives. What do you want to achieve? You've got presumably a pretty obvious big one in your funding target, but you might have some other ones that you want to think about. I'll talk you through that. People, who's your audience? Who are you trying to reach? Who are you trying to get to take part? What do you want to say to them? So what's your message, and how can we make something really compelling in that message? How are you going to get that message to those people? Your promotion. So what channels might you use? And lots of you I know will be quite small teams, might not have a ton of time or a ton of people to use all the different channels. So we're going to focus on how to hone in on what's going to be most useful way to use your time and resource. And planning. What are the actual tasks that we need to do? How can we make that achievable? And monitoring. How will we know if we've been successful? It's not something that on the final day of the campaign, done, okay, that's all we think about it. We want to have a bit of time to reflect on what we've learned, what we might use for next year or for future campaigns as well. And as Sahil said, I've been here, I've done fundraising, the Big Give in my previous roles before FSI. I worked for a small medium charity in East London, and we did the Christmas challenge each year, and that was my baby. And it's hard work, I won't lie. It feels like a very intense week, but it is also a really amazing opportunity to find new donors, to engage your supporters in new ways, to get the message out there. And if I can see for some of you who said it's your first Big Give campaign, I think it's a really nice opportunity to try new ways of fundraising and to take some risks and take some learning, because you've got that match funding pot to make it all worth it. So that first point then, setting your objectives. As I said, you've got one obvious big target, I'm assuming. You want to raise your target and you want to get all that match funding, but you might have some other targets and objectives to think about, or you might want to break that big one down. So you're going to have a thinking about, for your organization, what do you really want to get out of this beyond just the monetary target? Perhaps it's about getting new donors. So you might want to get 20 new people to donate for the first time. Or it might be about raising your profile more generally, using this as a way to maybe aim to get 100 new newsletter signups or social media followers. Maybe it's about how good are we at building relationships with our supporters, and you want to get at least 40% of last year's Big Give donors or previous campaigns donors to give again. One of the charities that was in the Christmas Challenge awards, the Charlie Waller Trust, it was really interesting because they really monitored the total raised, but also who was giving it. And they found this really useful for their future fundraising. So 56% of them were first-time donors, 20% of them were new to the charity overall, which is really useful information to know, we're reaching different people this way, or people that have known about us for a while are giving for the first time. What can we learn from this about what worked? And maybe we can use that in future campaigns as well. when you're thinking about your objectives, you're looking for something SMART. You might have heard this acronym in other contexts: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. So specific, it's really focused in on something. It's not just do good fundraising. It's focusing in on a particular area. It's measurable. There's something in there that we can tick yes or no, we achieved it. So a non-measurable one would be to get more new donors. A measurable one would be to get 20 new donors. It's actionable, so it's actually within your control. I think that's quite important, because sometimes we have targets that actually are affected by so many other things that's not really actionable by us. Realistic, knowing what you know about your audience, about your organization, about your capacity, about your 3 weeks leading up to it, what's actually realistic. And time bound. You've got a pretty obvious time bind here in the campaign dates, but you might have some things that lead beyond that as well. So this is my first opportunity for you to have a little think for your organization. Can you think of at least 2 objectives for your Big Give campaign? You've got your obvious one about how much you want to raise, but are there any other factors that you're thinking about doing? So I'll give you 2-3 minutes just think about that on your own, but I'd love to hear some examples in the chat box if anyone's up for sharing. So as soon as you've got one, feel free to pop it in the chat box, but I'll stay quiet for a little minute to give you some thinking time. Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Straight in there. Get new donors and raise awareness of our services. Do you think you could make that a little bit more specific or measurable? I know I've just asked you on the spot. So that's a really good broad objective. When you're kind of focusing in, you might want to do a bit of research and thinking to say, how many new donors would be enough? Is 1 enough? Is 100 enough? Lee, you want to promote the charity. So is that to new audiences, to your wider local community? Is it to new donors, new funders, new corporates? Who else are you aiming for? Lovely, some really specific ones there from Emily. You've got the total you want to raise. You want to get 10 individual giving donors, 50 signups to a newsletter, and get some press coverage, be featured in a local paper. Lovely, really good examples there. Thank you. Fab, Jamila wants to build awareness about the services and find new partners that want to work with you. I think that's a really nice one. Fundraising isn't just about the money, it's about the whole way you connect with your community and your networks. And I think it's really important to remember that time, support, input in all those different ways is as valuable as money to a lot of our success. So that's awesome. Double regular givers, get 10 new donors, and see if previous donors still give to us. Lovely. So hopefully you can see that it's worth having just that think about, beyond just the target we want to raise, are there other things that we'd like to achieve? Because that might lead you to different tasks, also get you to think about the bigger picture. Because a one-off campaign is amazing, all well and good, but it's still much more sustainable to retain those donors, to think about that in a strategic, long-term way. So make sure you've got an eye on that along the way. Cool. So we've got an idea of where we want to get to. Let's dive into how we're going to do that. So the first area to think about is who your audience are. Who's your people? Who are you trying to reach? And who's in your network? And I'm thinking not just current donors. Who else? I've given you all the answers there. I'm going to flick back to the slide before so you can't see them. And I would love to open that up to the chat box. Who is in your network that you might want to reach through this campaign? Any ideas? Pop them in the chat box for me. Lovely. Yeah, your volunteers. So volunteers might want to donate, but you also might get new volunteers who want to come and give their time. And this is a really nice way of getting the story out there. Thanks, Amber. Local businesses, amazing, especially if you work in a local area, local community. Getting those business support is a really great way to target. Staff, yeah, your staff, your people and their networks as well, the people they can talk to. The parents of the people you work with, yeah, parents, carers, networks of them, lovely. And I know sometimes you can feel a bit uncomfortable with that. And you've got to use, your sensitivity, your gut on that. But a lot of people will really want to support it because they've seen firsthand the magic that you can do. Yeah, friends and family, lovely. Previous clients, you want to support others. Brilliant. Previous donors, definitely. And partner organizations. Very good list, team. Cool. Yeah, I think you've covered most of my list. Oh, except we didn't hear trustees. So yeah, your trustees, I guess they can fall into your volunteer pool as well, but trustees are a great network. Get them to spread the word out there. There was I can't remember who it was now, one of the case studies. They did a really nice targeted email and push for their trustees to share out with their networks, which worked really well. Current staff, ex-staff as well, if you've got good relationships with people and people who really understand it. Partner organizations we had, corporate partners and local businesses or suppliers. Yes, it might not even be local business, it might be your suppliers. People who've fundraised for you. Do you have people who've done a fun run or who've done a bake sale for you? And your social media followers or newsletter subscribers. So they might not have donated before, but they've shown some kind of interest. Very good list. For each of these segments, you might want to take a different approach. So it's helpful to break it down, but you want to keep it to a level that's manageable for you. You might break it down within those areas as well. So for instance, with people who've donated before, you might have, for the general group of them, an email or a comms that goes out acknowledging their ongoing support, what has helped you achieve already, that you're grateful and they're part of your mission, your team, and then offer them the opportunity to double their support at the moment. You might have some information on the kind of typical gift size that they're giving that can help you ask for a specific amount or suggest an amount. Whereas if you've got some donors, a smaller number who may be given much bigger gifts, you might choose to take them on a one-by-one approach. You might share it out amongst your leadership or your trustees, to have a coffee with them, have a call with them, talk to them about the campaign, and ask them if they'd like to give. If you've got lapsed donors, so perhaps people who used to give monthly but no longer do, and presumably you've still got permission to speak to them, so that pull of doubling their donation might be just the thing to get them back involved in the organisation. They might have had to cancel it for a specific moment or purpose, or they might have just not felt that engaged with the cause anymore. And this might be the thing to spark it again for them. Your corporate partners or your suppliers or local businesses, they might be able to give a specific amount, or maybe their staff want to do a fundraising event for you or a fundraiser in-house for you. With all of that, you're thinking about from their perspective, what do they care most about and how do we reach them? We'll talk about in a minute. But as I said, don't go too deep and complex. You've got to think about how much resource you've actually got, how much data you've actually got to do that with. So if you've got a really established fundraising history, you might segment in lots of different ways. If you're really small or really new to it, you might just have a couple of different messages or different approaches. I love this case study from Time to Talk West Berkshire, who their target was £20,000, I think, in the Christmas challenge, which they absolutely smashed. And I was, really impressed by how creative they got thinking about their audiences. And they got people really excited about the campaign. So they spoke to a really wide range of people in their supporter base. So existing supporters, their past clients and their parents and carers, the trustees and their networks and the staff's networks, corporate sponsors, major donors, their grant funders as well, they told about it, and local schools they worked with and local groups. So they got support from all sorts of different people beyond just who was on their mailing list. The local truck festival, local schools, there was a stall at the Christmas fairs, Rotary clubs, there was a raffle for a quilt, there was an event, Highclere Castle, they did a talk and the ticket or donations went to the campaign. One of the trustees did a Santa run. This was the Christmas challenge. Probably going to be a little bit weird in May, but maybe you can think of something else. And the supporters all gave their donations through the big give in the week. So yeah, they said what worked well, their learnings were communicating in person and making sure they dedicated a bit of time to that rather than just sending a one-off email, making sure they really understood what it was and how amazing the doubling your donation element is, and really using those personal connections. They said that next year they want to try using a video because they think that might help bridge some of that storytelling without having to reach out one-on-one to people, and also trials and paid advertising because Facebook worked quite well for reaching people. So some questions coming in, just checking if any of them are super relevant. We'll bring the, cool, I think I'll let the Big Give team reply to those ones. So yeah, I liked this example of thinking about all those networks in a creative way rather than just the people we think of maybe as our donors. So another opportunity for you, just 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, to jot down as many different people in your network or groups in your network that you might want to reach in your campaign. Here's the prompts for an example. And let me know in the chat box if I've missed anyone in there. So just a few minutes to take some notes for yourself. Great, some ideas coming through. Ambassadors and patrons, excellent. Local voluntary councils to spread the word, commissioners, funders, yeah, brilliant. Even if they're not able to actually donate, they might spread the word for you or have some ideas for who you could reach out to. Make a noise, make some noise. Don't be afraid to ask. Few more seconds just to get that list down for yourself. Hopefully some ideas are already sparking to help out with our next couple of sections on what you might say to them and how you might get that message out to them as well. So hold those in your mind as well. Okay, let's move on then. So once we've got an idea of our overall objectives and who we're going to try and talk to, now we need to think about your message, telling your story, how you're going to compel those people to get involved and why they should support your cause. One place to start is thinking about a kind of what is the summary message or like the overall message of why you exist and why this matters. Thinking about the need for your work and the impact, the difference you make. So what is the problem that you're trying to solve, or what is happening right there? And don't be afraid to get into the root causes of things as well. It's really important that we don't kind of pathologize things into one-off things. Actually, there's a lot of stuff going on we know that is affecting mental health. So we can bring that to life as well. And what is the impact? What is the difference that you make for the people that you serve? So those are 2 questions to start with. We're going to have an exercise on that in a second. Remembering that people want to know what you actually do, like what your service is, but more than anything, they want to know why that matters, what that changes in people's lives, rather than the details of how you do it. I really like challenging every fundraising message I draft with so what and why now? Because to you, it's really obvious why you do what you do and why it's important and why it's important now. But it's not always important to everyone instinctively. It's not always obvious. So make sure you bring that to life for people and you answer those questions. Make it easier for them to say yes, then no. Take out the jargon. This is a big one. A lot of charities I see don't necessarily make that much sense to people outside the sector. Or I see a lot of people, if you're more comfortable with grant writing, using your grant words in your public facing comms. And sometimes that works. Sometimes it's really confusing or off-putting. Try and really bring it to life what it actually means. For instance, empowering, I see a lot. What does that really mean? Everyone could say they do that, but how can you describe that? What does that feel like to someone? Or what difference would that be in their life? One thing that I find really helpful, because I was a grant writer and then moved into wider fundraising. So I was really in that habit of copying and pasting my charity A is da 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 da. You know, you're quite bland opening summary, but actually I try and scrap that, start with either a blank page or a person in front of me who doesn't know the charity, and just describe, like, why do I think this matters on a one-on-one human level? If you try and capture that, that's probably going to be a lot more compelling than copying and pasting it from your funding application. Makes it a lot more genuine, usually, for me anyway. Bring it to life. Truly, why do you think that matters? So again, that technique helps me a lot to remember that I'm not just writing this for the sake of it. I'm writing it because it matters and because I believe in it. If you're struggling with that, you could go back and read some case studies, read some stories, have a chat to service users, to people that you work with. Think about what would happen if this organization wasn't there. Why do you get up every morning? And when you're reading back what you've written or watching a video back you've recorded, does it genuinely excite you and interest you? If it doesn't pass the U test in the first place, it's probably not going to pass it to everyone else who hasn't read this 1,000 times. Tell stories. We know that people are much more motivated by stories than by all your best statistics. The statistics and numbers are useful to give context, to give credibility, but ultimately people want to give to real people seeing change. So if you can bring that to life with case studies, with quotes, with stories, really thinking ethically about how you do that as well. So it's difficult, you've not got a huge amount of time before the campaign. Hopefully you've got some case studies maybe up your sleeve already, but I think it's really important that you get really genuine, enthusiastic buy-in from the people whose story you're telling. So offering people the opportunity to come forward with their stories, offering editorial control over how it's told, offering that they can pull it if they need to. I had a colleague who had a whole campaign ready to go, and then a few days before, the person whose story they were telling changed their mind. They weren't feeling up for it. And actually, it was a good sign that they felt able to say that. And they had to pivot. It was really difficult, but it's much better than exploiting anyone's stories against their will. So make sure you're building in a bit of that time and openness for yourself. Likewise, some people might be happy to have their story in a funding bid, but they wouldn't be happy to have it splashed all over the internet or your social media. So make sure you're asking those questions. But at the end of the day, stories really are what compel people to give. Think as well about the ethics of the stories you're using and the images. So we're making sure, as well as the consent element and the control element, that this is people's real lives and their real stories, thinking about how this is fitting in the bigger picture. So we're not reinforcing stereotypes. We're not reinforcing any idea that one person can save someone alone. We're not kind of reinforcing the donor as a savior. This is about big stuff. Like, the stuff you work on is really big and really tough, and it's okay to be truthful about that and think about the root causes and bring people in on this fight. If we all work together on this, this is good for us as a community, not just for individuals who are othered from us and the donors in one way or another. Another top tip that I find really useful is just remembering that you're probably not the ideal audience for your message. You know the organization, you already believe in it, that's why you're here. So thinking about who you could test it with, maybe with trustees, they might be quite a good model for people who are who are very invested and know a fair amount, like a regular donor, but aren't there on the day-to-day. maybe a trusted donor, if you've got anyone who maybe is a volunteer as well, so you get to see them a lot or they come to your events. I've had real success with this before, asking a donor to have a look over a proposal, and they give really useful feedback and said, can I be the lead donor on this? I'm really convinced. Have a think as well about testing it for different angles. Some people might be motivated by the type of people you're supporting. Maybe they like supporting families or young people. Others, it might be the community focused element. Others, it might be the unique approach that you take, or maybe you've got a creative and arts-based or sports approach, or the different elements that might tap into different motivations. And making it as easy as possible for people to donate. So make sure amongst all your amazing storytelling and your great messages, you've got the ask in there, and it's really easy as possible for people to donate. So link straight through to the donation platform. So once they're really moved by what they've read, they can give straight away. There was some really useful research that I've linked at the end of the slides as well from Blackboard recently about giving behaviors. So I definitely recommend having a read through that. Always have a pinch of salt with these things, because self-reported data doesn't always match up with what we actually see. So use your own instincts and your historical knowledge of your organization and your donors too. But there were some interesting things. For instance, they said 65% of people tend to give under £20, and pro bono economics also suggests that the average donation has stayed at around £20 since 2017, which obviously means it's worth quite a bit less now. We're going to talk in a second about how we address the cost of living crisis, and that's a challenging environment to be fundraising in. Interesting statistic that I'd not necessarily thought loads about before is that in this research, people over 55 were more likely to be quite loyal to charities, so to give to the same place each time, whereas people who are younger, 18 to 34, in that age bracket, they tend to jot around a bit more and give to what appeals to them at that time. But nonetheless, the majority of people place themselves somewhere in the middle, so it's not a hard and fast rule. But it's interesting to think about how you build that loyalty in different groups, or how you capture people who are just having a look round or following you rather than on social media, perhaps, rather than giving monthly. They reported that people's motivations were most likely to be helping a friend, so if it comes from a friend or family member, their idea of social responsibility, and helping the local community. And it's often triggered by a current event or a news story or a post on social media. So there's that real urgency, or that why now question coming through there. That's really captured people and motivated them to give. This is a non-big give example, but from Young Minds Support Us page that I thought was quite nice, quite worth checking out, because they have this video from one of their activists, and they pulled out a quote as well, so you don't have to just watch the video, where they're talking about why this matters. There are times when I don't leave my bed for days at a time. Young Minds has throughout my depression been something that gets me out of bed. It's a reason to continue. And that story, personal stories, we know, works. I also liked that quite near the top of the page, when you're looking at making a donation, it really highlights what your donation will do. And it's not, interestingly, because I know some of us get trapped into this, it's not specifying where this donation will go, but it's saying your donation will help create a world where no young person feels alone with their mental health. So tying you directly into that bigger picture mission. Cool. Got a couple of slides on, as requested, fundraising in the current climate, which is really tough. And yeah, it just is. We are seeing some increase in cancellations of direct debits, the Chartered Institute of Fundraising reports. And there was a BBC poll that suggests 60% of people did cut back on their donations. At the same time, Pro Bono Economics has estimated that average donations dropped. But as I said, always take self-reported surveys with a pinch of salt, because it doesn't always necessarily match up with what we see. And everyone's an individual. So we might see some trends, but we might see some different things. It's also worth noting that in this current climate, when people might be really struggling, we need to think about our ethics and more careful than ever to identify any vulnerable donors, and maybe offering other ways to get involved as well. But there is a little bit of hope on the horizon for your fundraising, at least, that some charities are actually finding mid-level givers increasing their donations. So maybe people who aren't being as harshly affected, but are feeling the environment and want to do more. The people who are seeing the increase in demand on charities. That Blackboard survey also said that a lot of donors reported that the pandemic didn't have a negative effect on their giving. So that's not the cost of living, but we were expecting that to drop in the pandemic, and it's not necessarily, at least in people's minds, how they've treated it. We know that the Christmas challenge, the big give last year, was the biggest yet. So there is still a lot of will to give. Alongside all of this, as you said before, we've got our funding target and we want to hit it, but there might be other ways of getting involved for people. Not everyone has to be a big donor. We value everyone's contributions. So maybe they could take part in a fundraising challenge. Maybe they could spread the word. Maybe they could go and chat to a community group or their Rotary Club, things like that. And finally, in this context, it's going to be really tough, but ultimately doubling your donation is a really appealing ask when each pound isn't going to be going as far. So leverage that. That's your unique ask at this point through this campaign. So that was a lot of information I just thrown at you. Feel free to ask me to go back over any of it. But in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to you once more to have a go at crafting your funding message, your headline message for your fundraising ask. Some prompts to think about: what is the need for your work, what you're doing, and so what and why now. So everyone works differently. The way I like to do that is just to free write, just to jot down as many thoughts or bullet points under each of those, and then pull out the things that seem most compelling. If you've got any quotes or case studies to hand, feel free to use those, to bring those in, or you could invent one for now and you know that you're going to go away and find a real one. It's 12:37, we're doing all right for time, so I'm going to give you a good 8 minutes or so to start having a think about that. I will be here if you have any questions, if you want to workshop what you're coming up with, if you want me to go back over any of the slides. But otherwise, I will sit here and let you have a go at crafting your Big Give Challenge message for the next 8 minutes. Brilliant. Starting to get some examples in the chat box. Thank you very much, Lee. Feel free to add yours and we'll take a look at them in a couple of minutes. And just to say as well, I quoted lots of research there and I've linked it all at the end, along with the community-centric fundraising principles, which I drew on in some of that as well, which I'd highly recommend having a look at as well. Yeah, a few more minutes working on your message. Okay, brilliant. A couple more minutes, you feel free to keep working if you'd like, and we can start having a look at some of the examples. So feel free to pop one in the chat box if you'd like. Or maybe if you got really stuck and you just want some feedback, this is a very kind, safe space and we can all give a little bit of feedback, not just from myself as well, if you want to pop something in. Okay, fab. Let's have a look at some then. So thank you, Lee, for sharing. Donate this week to support local mental health services and ensure no one needs struggle alone. Your donation will go twice as far during our Kind² match funding campaign. Lovely, you got all the key points in there. What I'd want to know is just a bit more of the human in there. Maybe it's about rejigging the order to bring the no one needs struggle alone at the top, but you can have a play with it. But I love, yeah, highlighting the donation will go twice as far. Any other feedback from the group? In the meantime, we can have a look at Louise's. Sufferers of psychosis and enduring mental health challenges are the largest category of disabilities claimants of PIP benefits by far. Through our work, we're encouraging confidence to engage in community activities, thus contribute to society rather than take from it, if that makes sense. Any feedback from the group? Personally, I found I got slightly lost in the middle, and it didn't feel, I needed to know a little bit more about why that matters to the people, rather than, I think maybe taking from society has slightly negative connotations, not maybe the most uplifting viewpoint of it. So thinking about why that matters to the people and what this can change for people. Yeah, maybe a little more specifics in there as well. But the information is useful and gives context. Corinna, people are facing unprecedented stress and challenges to their mental health. This has led to spiraling mental ill health and personal crisis needing more serious intentional This can often be avoided with the right early support. The big give will be doubling any donations made towards our wellbeing service this week. Please help if you can and spread the word to help us reach ever more people in need. Yeah, some nice stuff in there. You've got that urgency, you've got the context setting, and you've got the hope as well. This can often be avoided with the right early support. What I guess a challenge for you, Corinna, is to practice saying that out loud and say it to someone new or someone who doesn't know the organization, and think about what you might bring out in a really human level, and maybe about specifically why your charity is important in that, why your organization makes a difference. So you've got the big picture, you've got that this can be avoided, but where does your work fit into that, if that makes sense? Thank you everyone for, thanks Corinna, intervention. Yes, that makes sense. Some more lovely examples. We'll look at a couple more. From Helen, right now we're facing a crisis in children's mental health. More children are facing poor mental health. NHS services are stretched and can only treat those who are most unwell. The earlier a child receives support with their mental health, the more likely they are to recover and remain well. By donating, you're helping to create a Lancashire where children can get the support they need when they need it. I love that last sentence. It really brings the supporter into the cause and it makes it really compelling, I think. You're helping to create a Lancashire. It's specific as well because it's got that local focus. I think, yeah, with a bit of workshopping to maybe edit that beginning bit down, that's a really good context piece. Lovely. Bro. A really simple one from Emma, lovely for honing in there. Grief can have a long-term effect on young people's mental health. Our expert counsellors can support them to have a better future. That's a nice focus. You've got the need, you've got what you're doing to address, you've got the expert counsellors. As you're building that up once you go away, really bringing that to life with maybe some stories or what that means, what that feels or looks like to have a long-term effect on your mental health. Don't be afraid to bring that human in. Lovely. I can look at one more before we move on. From Anne, around 1.25 million people in the UK are affected by an eating disorder. We support people and their loved ones to know that recovery is possible through counselling and awareness training. Support our work and help us reach more people. Donate with Kind²Mind and see your donation doubled for twice the impact. Really like that last sentence, see a donation doubled for twice the impact. Really brilliant, focuses that in on it. And I like that it's got that bit specific about to know that recovery is possible through counselling and awareness raising. For me, I think this is possibly the way my mind works, but it's also feedback I've had from others. I don't really know if 1.25 million, that sounds like a lot of people. I'm not saying put a percentage in there, but maybe that element of bringing it to life as well. That is a huge number. Thank you. Fab. I'll shuffle us forwards, but if anyone else wants to give any feedback to any of the examples, you're really welcome to, in a really constructive, safe way, please. Pop it in the chat box. Some people are still posting just to hosts and panelists. If that was deliberate, that's all good. But if you wanted to share it with the group for feedback, you can repost it under everyone if you'd like. Brill. So once you've got an idea of who our people are, what our messages are, we can now think about how to get those messages to those people. So my first thing to think about is you've got your list of audiences, and I really encourage you to think about the channels where they already are and the channels you already use. It's really tempting to spread yourself really thin and try every single platform, every single channel, but most of us don't have teams big enough all the time in the next few weeks to do that. So we want to focus our energies in on the channels where people already are and where we're most likely to get through to them. If you have any information on the demographics of your donors or your social media followers or your newsletter subscribers, that might really help to think about where they're engaging with you. If you've got information on the trends of where people are supporting you, that's really worth utilizing. A few ideas. Website is a really obvious one. Having a support us page or a donate page is really useful. Make it really easy to navigate, get those stories on there. Quite often I go onto a support us page and it jumps straight into the donation element, which is good to make it easy to access, but actually you still need to do a bit of that convincing and storytelling at that point. You'll be surprised as well. I was always surprised every year how many people just donate because they've come across your website. Perhaps they've come across you elsewhere and then they check out the website. And if you've got the big give as a big homepage thing or a big donate button that makes it, draws people in, I was always surprised how many random donations we got that way. Obviously, again, use your knowledge of what your focus for your website is. If your website is mostly aimed at your service users to get the information they need, then that might not be appropriate. It might be you have to do it in a different way, but it might be suitable to do both. Have a think about what makes sense for your organization. Social media is a really big one. Interestingly, the data still suggests that cash is still the preferred way to donate. Online is very close second though. So while we think social media is the be all and end all, don't forget about some of those other ways like personal approaches, letters or posters, communications and events as well. But with social media, you can use some of the creative tools available there. We know videos work really well on social media. Basically, photos get hardly any engagement on Instagram, for instance, now. So even just turning something into a video doesn't have to be fancy. I love the look of a handheld video from one of your project managers or one of your clients or someone you partner organization. I think they can work really well and be really shareable. Make them short and snappy though. Emails, if you've got a newsletter, this is probably going to be one of your main focuses. One top tip, link straight to the big give. Don't put distracting links in there. We have had some feedback from previous participants that actually that was one of their learnings, was to make it really obvious to direct people to the big give platform to get their donation doubled, because one of the charities actually saw loads of people head to the website and donate to somewhere that didn't get it doubled. So make that journey, test it as well, practice that. What is the experience for a donor or for a supporter going from seeing an email, going through to the page, making a donation? What is that like? And with emails, have a think as well about the journey. Again, it's quite a quick turnaround now, but I recommend usually doing some kind of teaser or pre-launch thing just to let people know it's coming, save the date. You might segment that again based on if people have given to a campaign like this before for you. You might mention that differently to people who've never donated before. Phrase that. You have two different versions. And then you could have one when you launch. And then depending again on your segments and what you know of people, it might be appropriate to do an update and a wrap up at the end. If people normally get 2 emails from you a year, 4 emails in 2 weeks will probably feel like overkill. So use your judgment there. And of course, you've got to observe all your GDPR and PECA info too. PR and press, that was someone's objective at the start, which I thought was really good to include. Don't forget the power of local press. I actually gave a donation recently because I saw a charity mentioned in the local Gazette and it came through my door and I just thought the photo was great, and they were doing a crowdfunder for something really tangible and I went and donated. So people still do engage with these things. So if you can get a shout out in the paper, on local radio or through other networks, it may well be worth putting a bit of time into doing some press releases, especially if you've got really good photos or really good stories. Flyers and posters. If you've got a physical venue, we don't have to do it all digital. Put a poster up. Maybe it could go in local shops, in local library. You actually might reach quite a lot more people. Personal approaches. This might make most sense. It's obviously the most time intensive, so you won't be able to do this with everyone you know. But for people who might have the capacity to give bigger donations, you might reach out to them one-on-one. Perhaps it's people that you know can spread the word really well, give them a call. Don't forget the value of those conversations. Events, yeah, we had a couple of questions about that as well, which we'll come back to at the end. But if you've got an event in the lead up or in the week, even if it's something really light touch and small, I've heard of charities doing just like an info day or a webinar from one of their experts, or a top tip thing. There was a charity that I gave to through the Christmas challenge a few years ago. And in the summer, they then invited me to, they did a webinar talking through their impact report, which was really nice. And then the following Christmas, they did like a virtual carol service with a fundraising element for the Big Give, which I thought worked really nicely. And it was a sort of, I probably wouldn't have read the impact report if they'd emailed me, but it was interesting to hear about it. And direct mail as well. Again, a lot of people still do read. We think everything's digital, but a lot of people will read the letters that come to their house. So if that costs a bit more in time and money, but if you've got that information and you think that would be successful to you, there's lots of information around writing good appeal letters out there, but it is worth thinking about. It's something that I think we often overlook. One top tip that came from a case study, some of the feedback was try using the countdown feature on Instagram and Facebook. You can, in stories now, you can pop a little button saying Big Give launches in 48 hours or 72 hours. And then people can tap to get a reminder when it happens, so that they do half the job for you. And don't forget that statistic that 45% of respondents to that Blackboard survey said they're most likely to donate when a friend or family or colleague asks. So use those networks, make it as easy as possible for people to share. So give them a nice video or a nice little social media post that they can share for themselves. Amazing. Thank you, those of you who are giving a bit of feedback in the chat as well. More questions coming through. Lovely. I've got 2 case studies for you here, just because I thought they were really nice examples. This is from the Charlie Waller Trust, who I think I mentioned earlier. They really thought through their different audiences and the best channels for them. And what I liked is they also didn't just think in terms of who can donate the most money. It was who might connect us to people or might spread the word or influence people to donate, who might give us some expertise. Their main tools, they used email. They did that taster email 1 week before that had a save the date and a really nice video embedded. They did personal emails to long-term donors, and they did 3 emails during the campaign week. Their analysis of donations clearly showed that the 2 biggest fundraising days were the days they sent emails out. So it definitely worked to get those spikes in donations. They did use a video that told the story of the charity through the voices of 6 different people involved in different ways. They had a chair, trustee, trainer, parent, head teacher. And their top tip was to use the Big Give branding to give it more credibility, which is a question that Sarah's just popped in the chat. You will, I believe, have access to those to utilize them. And I like that example as well. We don't have time to look at loads of videos today, but in a lot of the work you do, it might be difficult to get consent or to get access to do videos because it might not be appropriate. It might be really personal, difficult stories that people aren't up for sharing, or you work with vulnerable people. So if you can get that from other perspectives, it could be a trustee, it could be a staff member or parent. It could also be something creative. I've seen some really nice examples where they've got a voiceover from a client or a service user, but have put it over like a hand, just a time lapse of someone drawing something, or little cartoon versions. What's that thing called? The Wallace and Gromit thing. I mean, that's probably quite a lot of work, but I've seen paper versions work quite nicely, or even just a slideshow of lovely images. Their website, they did add a campaign page to the website. They encouraged their social media followers to sign up to their email list because they felt you have a bit more direct access to people on email than social media. It's not always clear with the algorithm who's it going to reach on social media. They made an email to the staff to send out, but they also sent that to their freelancers, to their volunteers. They did a personal ask in the trustee meeting where they played the video and asked the trustees to share. So if any of you are trustees, I'm sure you feel slightly inundated with emails asking you for things. So maybe that personal, in-person or in a meeting conversation helped there. they took over their Instagram grid with reels and stories about the campaign, and they did Facebook Lives with the staff members, and they actually found their social media following increased on all their platforms during the campaign. And they did test paid ads, which worked quite well for them. And finally, one that I thought was really interesting, that I had not seen in many examples, was they just moved buildings. So they went around to all their neighbours and handed out a little postcard with a QR code to donate, information about who we are, welcome, like, nice to meet you. If you'd like to support, here's a QR code to do that. I thought that was nice. Another example of just some great social media ideas from Kind² Hope, who run connection and wellbeing programs. Facebook was already their most used platform, so they really focused their energies there, and they increased their page visits by 113% during the week. They used some videos and they brought a bit of fun and levity into it. So their communication and events manager dressed up, again, this was Christmas time, so maybe not the May elf, but she dressed up as a mental health elf to drum up support, wore the elf outfit for a whole week. It actually got loads of engagement and shares and support on social media. So something a bit fun and quirky did get through to people. Okay. So another minute or so for you to just reflect on all the information I've just thrown at you there, to have a think about. You've got your list of people, you've got some ideas for your messages. What are the different comms areas or channels you could use? And maybe give a tick or an X or a question mark next to each one, or who you think it might suit best. So we won't spend long on this, just to jot down any ideas that are floating around for the next minute or two. Okay. We're getting to our last section and of bringing this all together into a plan. So my top thing really is do as much as you can in advance. And I know this one, as we said, has got a bit of a tighter turnaround, but from my experience running a campaign, I can't tell you how useful this was the second year. Didn't do it the first year well enough, but just draft as much as you can in advance. Draft your emails, prepare your social media posts, get your thank yous ready, schedule some posts. Give yourself as much space as possible during the week to be responsive and reactive to what's happening. So get the basics that you know you need to get out there, get it all ready in advance. Likewise, sorting out your data in advance, so you're not on day one of the campaign trying to segment at that point or work out who should get what email. Dig a little around beforehand so you're all ready to go. You've got those lists. Plan out your timeline and key milestones, working back from the week and within the week as well. If you want to get a video out on day one, okay, we probably need to get it signed off 3 working days beforehand at the latest, which means we need to have it made 5 days before that, which means, oh God, we need to get moving on it tomorrow. Okay, cool. So working backwards, plan out those timelines and key milestones. Think as well about what you'll do if you need to adapt in the week. What will you do if you hit your target really early, but you want people to still keep donating, it just won't be matched? What about if you don't hit it? You know, if you get to the last few hours and you're still £1,000 away or £500 away, do you have someone, maybe a donor in your back pocket that you could ask to save them for that last donation? Make sure with your data as well, you've checked all your permissions, your GDPR and PECA information, so you know confidently how you can use each piece of that data. Do involve the whole team. I can see there's a couple of organizations where you've got more than one on it, but a lot of the time this will be one person's responsibility, and it's really hard work and it's a lot of work. So if you can spread it out in some way, highly recommend that. Time to Talk West Berkshire that I showed earlier, they only have one person working in fundraising and comms, but they made a real point of involving trustees, some volunteers, their young ambassadors, and other staff. And they said, we all pulled together and smashed the target. So it really felt like a team effort. So that could go for things like making those one-on-one approaches, proofreading things, or getting case studies and stories. That doesn't have to all be on one person. And finally, make sure you leave some time to learn and debrief. As I said, it can be really tempting to get to the end of the week and go, oh, I am so glad that's done. Well done, us. Make sure you've got that time to celebrate and relax, but also maybe a few days later, bring the team together, get some feedback, have a look at what happened, what emails really worked, what social media posts got the most engagement. Did we hit those objectives we wanted to? Did we get the new donors? Did we get the new followers? What can we learn and use for next year? It will really pay off to do that thinking now. This is an example that I quite like to use. It's very straightforward, basically bringing together everything we talked about today into a table where you've got your current audiences, you're segmenting those people out, what your message for each is going to be, how you're going to reach them, and the timing. You might break it down further into tasks, but I usually do that as a slightly separate timeline. I'll show you in a second. But you can see here that I've separated out for current donors, so people who are already giving monthly perhaps. You're really referencing how their support is currently helping, keep joining us on the journey and doubling the donation. Whereas for lapsed donors, you might bring them back in with that doubling donation, please join us, increasing need, that movement and urgency. Another example, and don't worry, you will get the slides, as I said, to have a more detailed look at these things. Planning your timeline. So like I said, working as detailed as you can realistically. In the months leading up to a campaign, you can do monthly target deadlines or weekly deadlines. As you get closer and closer, you're going to want to go day by day. And make sure you think about the realities of doing all these things. So if you know it's going to need sign off, give yourself some buffer for that. If you know it's probably going to need a couple of drafts, give yourself some time to do that as well. Always adding in a column of who's responsible. So that can really help, like I said, spread out the load, spread the work away from just one person. It might be that, your chair or your CEO makes the personal approaches to your major donors. You might have someone in comms who could send the launch email, whereas the fundraiser does social media, or vice versa. And the final column you can see there is progress. I like using a red, amber, green system because I think it's really straightforward and it helps everyone see what's going on. Green being, did it all on time, it's looking good, happy with it. Amber, maybe we're a bit delayed, maybe we didn't get the case study in time, or maybe actually the idea we thought wasn't going to work, what we thought we'd use isn't going to work, so we have to adapt it. Or red, we are so far off track with this, or we're not going to get it in time, or actually we can't do this at all. What that does is just give everyone a bit more focus. If you can use this in a weekly catch up, or looking at what needs to go on, you know how to spend your energy on adapting the ambers and pivoting on your reds. Fab. I have shown you so much information today. You will get the slides in the recording. Thank you very much for joining in and sharing your examples. Really appreciate that. I'll run through some top tips and then we've got loads of time for Q&A. So like I said, invest that time in planning in advance. It's really tempting to leave it to the week or be like, oh, it won't take that long to write thank you email. It always takes longer than you think, and you will thank yourself if you at least have a draft to edit in the week. Make the most of all your networks, get creative. I really like those examples we saw earlier about people using Christmas Fates or the Rotary clubs, all those things, or the fundraising elf Don't be afraid to make the ask. If people can't support, they can't support. We're not going to pressure everyone, but we're giving them an opportunity to be part of something. Test your messages with people who aren't super familiar with the organisation, so who might have a different perspective. See if you can get some different viewpoints. Like I said, make sure that journey is really easy. Get people to test it. You will be surprised how many people on day one of a challenge discover there's a broken link, or it's not really obvious where to click to donate. Just practice that journey. Make sure you don't lose anyone along the way. Think about the long-term picture for your fundraising. So you've got this amazing opportunity to generate a real buzz around your organization. Make sure you build on that. Thank every donor. It takes time, but it's worth it. We know that it's much more effective to retain donors than to keep chasing new ones every time. So invite them to stay involved. Think about how you're going to follow up in a month or two with what the big give helped you achieve, what their donation helped you do, and how they can get involved in the future. And put in that time for debriefing, learning, reflecting, and celebrating, because it is hard work. And I'm sure you're all going to smash your target. And well done for getting this far. And really good luck for your campaigns. Time for Q&A.
Thanks, Lindsay. That was a really great webinar, and also want to thank everyone for being so engaged with it and just providing a lot of like sort of examples and sharing your sort of your thoughts. So really thanks everyone for joining us for this webinar. As Lindsay mentioned, we have some good time for some Q&A, so just bear with me. So we'll just start off with some quick questions. So Michelle asked, can donors give by CAF? Unfortunately not, we don't support CAF payments, so we'll have to be by one of the payment methods we outlined earlier: credit, debit card, Google, Apple Pay, or BACS. If it's above £500, donors can use that facility. How long does it take for your dashboard sign off and live once you've completed your bank and trustee details? By Jade. It should take 1 to 2 days for us to verify the bank or check the bank details and hopefully sign off for them. Just to probably urge everyone that hasn't already done this, we need you to upload your bank and trustee details for your to able to run your campaign page and for you to take part in the campaign. We sent an email out to everyone that hasn't done this yet, so please do this, and it has to be done before the campaign starts. Otherwise your campaign page won't launch and you can't take donations, so please get cracking with that as soon as possible. I have a question that maybe Beth can answer. What happens if we raise more or less than the target set in the terms of match donations, please? That's by Said.
Yeah, good question. So there's no consequence if you don't reach your target. You know, you'll receive everything you raise plus that amount matched. If you go over your target, anything you raise over your set match funding amount will just count as extra unrestricted and unmatched donations to your campaign. So you can still continue to receive those donations even once you've reached that matched amount. But yeah, again, you will receive everything you raise plus that amount matched.
Great. We also have a question, maybe Beth can answer, I can chime in, and Lindsay, you may have some thoughts here. This is from Tilly. Could you please speak a little on how to make the individual fundraiser challenges that our staff and volunteers are taking up compelling, despite them linking to a general fundraising page? So for added context, like some of their staff and volunteers are doing their own like sort of challenges, such as sponsored walk, head shave. And with the Big Give website, unfortunately, we don't have individual pages for sort of individual fundraising. It's all just on one campaign page. So maybe Beth, you can answer first. Is there any advice you have of how they can overcome this and how they can sort of make it compelling?
Maybe one way is to create a landing page on your website. You could have all of the links to the individual fundraiser pages that you have set up for those fundraisers. Obviously, you could have your Big Give one as the main link that people see first, so you're not directing them potentially away from that. But it could be just a good way to kind of talk about what you're doing as a whole for the campaign and give a few updates on the projects that those fundraisers are doing. So yeah, that's potentially one option.
And yeah, when you're linking on the end, like you could create a landing page maybe for each individual fundraiser and then create a bit.ly link for using your Big Give campaign page, but create a unique bit.ly link for each sort of fundraiser, so you can sort of track who's donating through which landing page. So that's an idea that you can use as well, Tilly.
That's a good idea. Yeah, and just remembering that those people, their donations are most likely to come from friends and family. So what your website looks like is probably the least important compared to what they're sending out. So maybe it's about giving them really good assets to put in an email, or like make sure they've got stories or quotes if they want them. But ultimately, yeah, their personal connection is going to be what matters. So making that as easy as possible to get it through to the donation. But I like that tracked bit.ly, so you can see overall roughly who donated what. Nice.
And there's a question here about for Beth to answer. Are you sharing the Kind²Mind digital assets?
Yes, so all of the Kind²Mind assets are available now to you. So if you log into the portal, go to support, there's a Kind²Mind box there, which you can click on. And there are a couple of resources that have the marketing assets and also a toolkit to give you just a breakdown of how you can start to use those assets. And there are links to the Canva template, so you can edit and make them your own as well. So you should be able to access all of those, but please do send us an email if you have any issues with that.
I just like to add, we are aware there's a slight issue with the resources showing at the moment. So some of you have already raised it in the Q&A. So we have already flagged it now to our tech team to look into. So if you can't currently access it, don't worry, it's not unique for you, and we are working to fix that. So apologies for the inconvenience, but hopefully we should get that fixed very soon. There's a question here: would we be able to do bucket collections, or can it be only online fundraising? We've had this question asked before, and what you can do is like you can sort of do a bucket collection, and then someone that works for the charity can then make a sort of collect all of those donations and make a donation during the campaign week with their personal card. Two caveats there was we'd always urge you to obviously consult with your sort of finance team about how to correctly show this in your accounts. And secondly, if you are doing this, that person, they can't claim gift aid on that donation, obviously, because it's sort of a collection of actually other people's donations. But that's one way you can sort of do a bucket collection and then donate during the campaign week. We have a question from Amber: how can we get other grants and trusts involved? If you're asking about how they can donate, if they want to donate more than £500, we do have the BACS donation facility, and we will be sending you an email about how donors can use that. So often grants and trusts don't have a credit card to make a donation or a debit card, so they can use this option to make a donation. This question maybe Beth you want to pick up. How would having an event or raffle work and link to our Big Give campaign page? Do we just use the URL to our Big Give platform?
Yeah, exactly. Any kind of fundraising event that you're doing, if you have, I know some charities have had like laptops and stuff or phones available so people can donate directly at the event, or they might have, as Lindsay mentioned, like QR codes on posters and flyers available. So it's really easy for them to donate directly to your campaign page at the event as well. So yeah, whatever fundraising event that you are doing, I'll just advise making sure that your campaign page is as easily accessible as possible, and working out what way the best way to do that is.
We had a question from Tess regarding the top-ups. What does this sentence mean? You will not receive additional match funding from the Big Give if you decide to top up your match funds from your own supporters. So sometimes some charities for other campaigns, they want to sort of increase the amount of match funds they have available, and they decide to add in match funds from their own supporters into their match funding pot. And so we've given this option to charities. And we just wanted to clarify, you can do this, but if you do decide to sort of bring in more match funds from your own supporters, it doesn't mean that we'll sort of increase the amount of match funds that we have assigned to your your campaign. But you're more than welcome if you have like a major donor that wants to put in, like, so for example, another £2,000 to your match funds, they're more than welcome to do that. So you have a sort of bigger campaign target and more match funds available during your campaign.
There's just been a couple of questions about the campaign in general. So in terms of the campaign link, you should have access to your campaign pages now. The only reason you wouldn't have access at the moment is if you haven't uploaded your bank details and had them approved by us. So please do check after this, and if you can't see your campaign page, make sure you do have them bank details added. But you should be able to access the campaign link now and start promoting from now if you want to. And also, just in terms of the donate function, the donate button is only available on those campaign pages when the campaign starts at 12 p.m. midday on the 15th. So Shirley, I can see that you're raising some donations at the moment, but you'll only be able to have those donated via the campaign when on the 15th, when that campaign actually starts.
Sorry, and there was a question from Sarah. Did I miss the BACS information, where the BACS information is? No, we will be sending that email to you about how that BACS information very soon. So don't worry, we haven't already shared it with you. We will be sharing it very soon. Are there any other questions that you can see, Beth?
Have we spoken about the Google Ad grants? Yeah. If not, the question is, can we use Google Ad grants to advertise your Big Give appeal on our website? And the short answer to that is yes, you can. So I don't know if you have anything to add about Google Ads.
Just that if anyone is unaware, we do have sort of Google offers some sort of ad grants to charities or non-profits. So you can basically run free adverts on their site. It's well worth looking into. We use it and a lot of charities use it. It's basically free money. There is a bit of a learning curve with Google Ads, but it's definitely worth it. I mean, as I say, it's free money, and it's something definitely to try. Maybe you don't have the capacity for this campaign, definitely going forwards, it's worth looking into just generally as well as a non-profit to try and use that resource. Just having a look if there are any final questions. I think that's it. I'm not sure if there are any further questions. But if we have missed any questions, sorry, just someone had. Can gifts in the campaign week be gift aided? Yes, in the donation journey, we do ask donors if their donation is gift aid eligible. I will be sending an email to charities about if you want us to claim gift aid for you today or tomorrow. So if you want to authorize us to claim gift aid for you, just have a look at that email, or you can claim gift aid yourself. It's up to you how you want to manage that, but yeah, donations are gift aid eligible, or we ask that to donors. I think that is it. So firstly, I want to thank Lindsay again for delivering such a great webinar, amazingly useful content for all the charities. I definitely know, like every time Lindsay delivers a webinar, we'd learn something new from our end. So really thank you again, Lindsay, for taking the time out of your day to share your knowledge with us.
There's links on this next page as well, like I mentioned.
Brilliant. Oh, brilliant. As Lindsay mentioned, we will be sharing the slides as well, so you can access all of these links. But thanks for putting those links together. Want to thank everyone else for joining us today, all the charities. You've been really great, really engaging and interacting with the content today. If we missed any questions or you have any further questions after this webinar, like I've said before, just email us at hello@biggive.org and we'll get right back to you as soon as we can and help provide the support that you need. With that in mind, I think we will end the webinar, but good luck for all of your campaigns and keep an eye out for our emails going forward. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.